what is actually going on? Because your institution is actually supposed to be seeing or overseeing the growth of this trade, yet we're seeing a decline. What can we hear from you on this perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Eugene. And to just give you a little bit of a background on intra-regional trade, in 2017 we saw a reduction of about 14.6% reduction in intra EAC trade. And if you look at EAC trade, intra EAC trade, we have about 10%, less than 10% actually, about 9% of intra EAC trade compared to all trade. If you compare that to, say, the EU, where you have over 60% of intra-EU trade, you can see that there's a lot of room for growth. What are some of the things that are holding that back is, I think that, first of all, we've had climate change issues, but I would put that on the side. A lot of it is political. The political will hasn't really been there.
So the politicians are the ones rolling back the gains that are being made in the sector, the areas of trade in the region?
Absolutely. I think political goodwill, if you're going to see an increase in any intra-regional trade, it has to start off with political goodwill. But if you look at, say, the changes in trade between Kenya and Tanzania, one-time sugar being, importation of sugar being stopped, then carrots, then etc., without really any tangible reasons, then you can see that it all starts with the politicians.
Right. We'll talk a bit about that, the trade disputes that have taken place, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Tanzania. But I want to stick back on the issue that you just said, the political will. These are the same leaders who actually put pen to paper on the Common Market Protocol, the Customs Union. What does it say about them then, if they're not ready to walk the talk?
Yeah, so I think that the single customs territory is an amazing platform. It's the right policy to put in place. But then at the end of the day, you have to actually have the willingness at the top, the people who are signing these agreements. To remove the non-tariff barriers. And if you say that, for example, agricultural commodities are going to be traded in such a way, these are the tariffs that are going to be charged, or if you have the goods coming from EAC being non-taxable, that has to be enforced immediately. So I'm not in position to speak about on politicians, but I think what I can say is that the political will really needs to be there.
So probably, sorry, patience, I'm going to cut you short on that, because I'll push you on this, because it's definitely one of the key things that you actually highlight as one of the problems. Yeah. And probably the problem is that there isn't much that institutions like yours can do to actually push these leaders to actually walk the talk. So what do we do then? Should we approach it in a carrot and stick way? And what should be the solution then? Are we throwing our hands up and saying, no, we can do this?
We cannot. I think it's a normal progression towards being really fully integrated. It starts off with countries, first of all, looking at themselves as competitors, but then later you realize that you have to negotiate as a bloc. For example, if we're talking about the African CFTA, we have to negotiate for this CFTA as a region. Right. If we can't sort out our problems as countries, then we're not going to negotiate a good deal for EAC. So, we start off there. We start off as competition, and then with time, that regional integration actually will take place.
There's been a concern, especially now going back to the trade disputes that have been witnessed, a couple of weeks ago, even and months ago. Kenya and Tanzania did agree on February to sort out the trade issues that were taking place. But of course, you've mentioned or alluded to some of them right there. I spoke to one official from the Business Council, the East African Business Council, and what she was actually saying, the problem was that there's a challenge of interpretation of the laws that have actually been agreed upon at the EAC level. Yeah. From Trademark East Africa perspective, is there anything that you can do to avoid these disputes to a point where heads of states now have to start coming in to sort out the mess?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that we can do. I think the first thing is to really help the private sector to be able to do some good evidence-based research. So, for example, if we say that the government, the policy makers will go by what the private sector is saying. So we have to make sure that the private sector's voice is heard. And that is going to happen if we're able to really have some really good research to say, if you put such an XYZ duties, this is the impact it will have to the business. So the role that Trademark there plays is really to support the private sector to make their voice heard through research, through improved advocacy, And we've seen really good gains. In Rwanda specifically, we've worked with the private sector at the time when there were proposed changes, for example, in the property taxes. The taxes were going to be increased, and then we came in to help the private sector to do a study around what that would really mean for businesses.
Right.
And because of that advocacy that happened between the private sector and the government, they were able to go back and review the proposal. So it's the same thing.
There's room for change.
Definitely.
Can this be done also with Kenya right now? They're
Absolutely.
now battling the 16% VAT tax on petroleum products. What can the Trademark East Africa do or say on this?
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're working with the EAC, EABC, to make sure that both at the Secretariat but also within the national governments, that the capacity of the private sector is enhanced, and that those discussions happen both at a national level but also at a regional level.
Right. Finally, Patience, what do you promise the people of East Africa as far as increasing intra EAC trade is concerned from your end as Trademark East Africa?
So there's a lot that Trademark is doing. For the next phase of our funding, we have secured about 600 million across the EAC, and we're going to invest the resources in activities or in projects that are going to help us to reduce barriers to trade. Mostly by investing in infrastructure to improve the effectiveness and the capacity of infrastructure, by investing in making sure that the trading standards are harmonized across EAC, because one of the other constraints to EAC, intra EAC, is harmonization of these standards. Making sure that the trade processes are transparent, because in some of these countries, if I need to export, say, to Tanzania or to Kenya or Uganda, I can't really tell from where I sit what the trading processes are and what the duties are going to be. So making sure that the processes are streamlined, that they're available, information is available, and then also working with the national governments to make sure that the right policies are there to enhance this intra-regional trade.